Hello, this is Gene. Decided to do a different video today because I started thinking about something that I want to talk about. So I'm going to title this thing as The Curious Case of Owen Benjamin. And many people would probably know who he is. He's a comic, stand-up comic, and he's gotten in trouble in Hollywood for his views. He's a conservative. It's strange that he gets labeled as alt-right because he says some of the same things that we talk about. He has a problem against Islam, not so much Muslims, but he has a problem against the ideology of Islam, I guess. And he says certain things that, you can say, hey, yeah, I understand that. He's like Ben Shapiro or Kevin McGinnis. Basically, these are guys that are alt-right. They won't go down to the next level because they end up getting basically tied down with that label anyway. Gavin McGinnis lost all of his social media stuff. Same thing as Alex Jones. Same thing happened to this guy. Although I think he's still back on Twitter. And he has his YouTube channel, and he does pretty well. He's got over 200,000 subscribers. And basically he's being funded by his subscribers right now because he can't really get any jobs. He has to tour, basically has to crowd fund his tour. But anyway, I look online, he's got about $800,000 in his net worth. So he's not hurting that much. But it's funny in a lot of ways. He says things that are just outlandish when it comes to the moon. So I just want to talk about him and guys that you're going to see in the future. They're going to be never going to be consider themselves alt-right or white nationalists or whatever, because they don't want to put themselves in that that side. But when shit hits the fan, of course, they're going to be on our side. So, again, I just watched him. I didn't know him, really. I didn't know that he was on Punk. I never watched that show. He's a guy who talks about the pedophilia that goes on in Hollywood. There are a lot of guys in there since Pizzagate came out. I guess he started saying stuff like that. And he starts saying that some of the celebrities have a very satanic background. There are Satanists. They believe in, baby rape and all this stuff. It's very conspiratorial stuff. This is something I actually read and watch a lot of YouTube channels on. There's a couple guys that I watch. Some of them come from the religious side, saying that that we have to be ready because Jesus is going to come and he's going to wipe away all this stuff. So you have to be religiously set up or ready to go. So again, these guys, you take them with a grain of salt, but it's just interesting. These are the same type of guys when you challenge their beliefs that we never went to the moon, that they'll just get on and they'll say something about you online, or they'll tweet you down, or they'll do a response against you on their channel, because clearly they're good at what they do. He's a verbal guy. Anybody that's going to come with him in a verbal fight, he's going to win. I mean, I can't do it because my speech has been changed since I had my stroke. So no matter what I would tell this guy, he reminds me of a lot of the flat earthers. A lot of flat earthers believe that space isn't real, that we could never got to the moon. They believe a little bit differently. But I watched some of the video that he did, and he said that there's no way you can get to the moon because of how the atmosphere is. So this is a very similar diatribe that you'll get from the flat earthers. It's saying, oh, we can't do it. And it's just strange to me because I worked in space for a long time, over 20 years. And obviously when I was young there in the 80s, I was seeing guys that had worked on the moon landings and Voyager, Apollo, Gemini, Mercury, and all that stuff. That they were, as they get older in life, they're getting up into bigger levels of management, and eventually they retire. And the pride that they have for what they did, especially all of them really, because each one had a different thing that they had to get past. We had to get a human being in space, orbit the moon or the Earth. Then you had to get a point where you could dock with what is it called? Whatever this dock, and then they would go off from that to the moon. So there were different stages that you go through, and this was one of the greatest achievement in human history. So I want to back off of this and say, when somebody like him, who's supposedly red-pilled, who understands the anti-white propaganda that's going on right now in the West, when we're talking about the greatest white achievement ever in my lifetime, and probably in history, to take a computer that could only process at about 64K, and we got to the moon and got back safely, and you're saying that we didn't get there. So you're taking our greatest technological achievement away from us. So I think you're part of the problem. And and he last night he was talking about people that are Jewish, that people are just jealous of them. And this is something that you'll hear a lot from conservatives who will not have anything bad to say about Jewish people or Israel. And it's fine. He can say it because his grandmother was a Jew. So obviously he's going to defend his family name. Now, he doesn't really act like he's a Jew, and he keeps talking about Jewish things and Jewish people with the money and all that stuff, and that's part of their stereotype. So when you say that, I guess it's okay from a Jew, or somebody who's 1/8 Jew or 0.14 Jew can say this. But if I say that one of our greatest accomplishments was getting to the moon, that it shows the I don't know what the word is, that we always search, that we always have risks, and this is something that is almost not uniquely European, let's say, but it's something we had to do. We had to. I mean, we lived, 9 months that we were like, below zeros, had to survive. So we had to go out and risk ourselves and go out and get money or get food for the family. And this is something that's just innate in our people. And the greatest accomplishment that we ever had, of course, we did all this other stuff. I mean, Willow Wright, the Whites, the Wright brothers, Edison, all these guys are white people. Anyway, so I keep thinking that this is kind of like another anti-white rhetoric that says, no, we can't be proud of what we just did there because, it was the greatest thing ever at that point. And what we got from that is all the stuff that we have right now. What we're talking about right now is from the space program. So when somebody like that says we didn't get to the moon, but I guess none of the probes that we did on Mars or Jupiter or Saturn, that we had the ability to do that, but we never get to the moon. And it's just I'm not going to say the arrogance or the naivety of it all. The guy's obviously a very smart guy, probably has a high IQ, but he's buying this idea that we didn't go to the moon because apparently our government might have had a backup plan just to show the Russians that, hey, we got there. Whether or not we had Kubrick doing something on a stage somewhere just to fool the Russians because they had got so fast, they got so far in front of us in the space. I guess that was all fake too. When Gagarin came back, I guess that was all fake. And then when Shepard came back, the idea that it was such a conspiracy for all of it, to go to Mercury, Gemini, to Apollo, it was all fake, that we didn't get on the moon, when you can, right now, if you have a decent telescope, well, it has to be really good, you can actually see the stuff we left there, that we just dropped it off and we never actually get on the moon. I mean, it's stupid. So a guy like him who has this type of following, who's actually red pilling a lot of people, young people, because he's somewhat younger than me, but he says stupid shit like this, and he talks about false flags and stuff, and he defends Alex Jones. And the point I'm trying to make here is, if I respond to him, he's going to say something, and he's going to try to go after me, or his fans are going to come after me. And I just subscribe to him. I like to listen to what he has to say. I mean, the guy he has a mental issue. He's somebody that has to listen to himself talk. Now, again, this is what people are good comedic comics, let's say. A lot of them have this narcissistic thing, but they also have this self-deprecation thing as well. And he has to hear himself talk, and he has to have approval from people who are listening to him. But when somebody said something against him, he's like Trump. He can't deal with it. He's a thick skin, and then he uses his physical side that he's 6'6", 6'7", and he's going to do something to people. I'm like, I don't know what you're going to do, because I I have something that could stop anything you're going to do. I'll just have my gun and shoot you if you do something to me. But I don't know. It's one of those things that there are so many guys that have a lot of good ideas. He talks about the family, the fathers, and the home, and all this. These are very good things. But then I guess this is something that he just fervently believes that we didn't go to the moon. And it makes no sense that why have we been able to go somewhere else, but we decide that we couldn't go to the moon. It makes no sense. Everything is mapped out mathematically. If you just say how fast we were going from the Earth, how long it took us to get to the moon, it's almost exactly what it would have been. How we got it, and then people try to say that I just saw somebody else said this is how I proved that we didn't go on the moon, because we had a transmission from the moon back to the surface when Neil Armstrong went on the moon, and then when we got to Mars, they even had the same thing when we landed there. Like it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. The reason why we had a camera there just so we could have that moment for history. So he had that already there. And of course, he actually touched the moon before he actually did the other thing, just to make sure that he could. You don't just jump off onto the lunar surface, because who knows, he might have went down into somewhere. But anyway, it is when you say stuff like this, when you talk about the courage and the brave men that did this, the balls of steel these guys had being on those rockets and going to the moon, and then some of them almost died. Well, a couple of people died on the ground, and they died for the purpose to go forward. And then when guys who actually got on the moon, 12 or 13 of them that actually got on the moon, and you're just saying that what they just did was not real, that was fake. I mean, I want to punch the guy in the face for saying shit like this. These are heroes that should be looked at the same level as any other huge heroes in this country. When you talk about Washington, Lincoln, Jefferson, Hamilton, these guys are at the same level. I mean, or if you want to talk about the Europeans that came over here and settled this country, Columbus, whatever you want to say about him. Obviously, it was very prayed for him, and it took a lot of courage to go across the seas to come here, even though he didn't think he was going there. Our ancestors, like the Vikings that came here before, these are things that should be applauded and cherished, and not should be continually saying stuff like this when you have absolutely no proof of this. There's nobody who's come out and said I was part of the program, that it was all fake. Nobody's come out and said that. And the fact is, I knew some of these people, and I talked to these people, and because people always ask what it's like on the moon. Whether you're in the movie or in the room with them, or you're hearing this conversation, just to hear how their eyes light up. Some of them, they get upset and keep asking over it, but there are certain things that come up, and then they remember them being there. You can see their remembrance of being on the moon and how important it was to them. I mean, talking to Level, or talking to Saracen, or talking to Armstrong, or talking to Gordo, and all these guys. It's just, I don't even know how. I mean, I get so upset because they were heroes to me. When I was growing up, I had the Apollo rocket, I had the moon lander and all this stuff, and Eagle 1, and I was playing with them. I had a Godzilla thing that would come in and would beat them up. And so I had the trading cards, and I just wished we would have stayed on that course, because we'd have a base on the moon, and we'd be going to Mars and Jupiter, and we'd probably have settlements already there. But we decided there was more important thing. We had, obviously, Vietnam was costing money for us, and things were going on. We had racial issues that are still going on, but it was really bad in the early 70s, late 60s. And they decided to say that the space program went down further. And they continually say that NASA is this conspiracy thing, that they're hiding us from stuff. I'm not saying that NASA doesn't have a wing in it that doesn't tell us everything they see in space. I'm not saying that's not true. But I worked in space. I cataloged UFOs. Now, what you think is UFOs and what's UFOs, when you track something and you can't readily identify it, we have to catalog it for something. And then eventually we figure out what it is. If it keeps going, it has to continually comes around. This is the same thing like flat Earth says we don't live in a sphere. Well, these little things would come back at the same time where you're at. So you could see it, and then eventually you can catalog it, and you can actually see things more and find, oh, it's just some sort of space junk from a satellite or a booster or something that's staying in space. And the flat earthers believe that we don't have all this junk in space. Well, clearly we do, because I had to crack it. And every year, every day I had to do this to make sure where they went, because you had to do this for all the launches that we had. We had to have an avoidance test to make sure that if we launched this point, would there be anything in its way? Because clearly it couldn't matter if it's just like a screw that went the wrong way. It could hit the outside of the aircraft, and then things could happen to it. So this is something that goes on all the time. That's not conspiracy. This is people doing it to make sure that this launch will not be impacted by avoidance from other things that are set in space. It's just, I don't understand it. These guys think that they're so smart when it comes to science, and they believe that. And again, I'm not saying that we didn't have a backup plan, because this is propaganda. I'm not saying that Kubrick wasn't in there doing something in case we didn't get to the moon. There's a very good possibility that he was. We talk about this in Roswell. For years, Air Force, nothing happened there. And then eventually they said they would do experiments on that, and they had like dummies that were coming out, and that's what the people on the ground found. But they thought it was something else. I think that's probably a more logical explanation than there was an alien craft there, and then there was small bodies in there, and it went off to Ohio. I mean, you saw what was actually photographed. It looked like aluminum foil. I mean, tell me how that can get across the galaxy. I mean, also at Area 51. I'm not saying there isn't something there, but that place was a test place, classified test place, and that's where stealth and the stealth foot that looks like this was being tested, so people would see that, the triangle ships. But these were all things that we made. I'm not saying that Lazar didn't see another part of Area 51 that might actually have aliens. But and I was 11 years old when I saw a UFO that was right above me that was at least 100 yards long. It's nothing I've ever seen before, and it was a sausage. So I believe there's a possibility this was going on. And obviously I was a young kid, but I know what I saw. So, and of course, you know that the Nazis tested flying saucers. So it's not like we didn't have that. And we have the sightings over Washington, D.C. in the 50s. But again, I still think that probably was man-made, that they were trying to test our security system, so whatever. This is what the military does. They have this thing in place. So there's a difference to me. Not that the NASA isn't part of the military complex, because it kind of is, but the people that work there are not necessarily that. And the astronauts, even though some of them were military officers, doesn't necessarily mean that they're part of this cabal that it's all going to be secret. It just, I tell you what, if anything in history, this is what I believe. Most things are very simple. We let our mind just try to fill in spots because of things we don't understand. I think it's logical that we got to the moon. I think that everything that happened on the moon was real. I think that only one person shot Kennedy. So I'm not saying that he wasn't duped to go do it by somebody else that wanted him to be the patsy. But everything, when it comes down to it, it's usually the simplest explanation. The idea, we talk about Kennedy and we say that we don't have any proof that there's been any other people. In all the forensics shows that it was from behind, even though it looks different when you're looking at it, but when you actually look at it, everything sets up with somebody where he was in the building behind him. And it's the same thing of getting to the moon, how much it took to get there. Everything is pretty much simple. And then we start trying to find things a little bit more, oh, this can't be true. Nobody would have wanted to do this to the president. Or we did this because we wanted to win the space war or whatever. I don't know when it actually started, this whole thing of not getting on the moon. Or just because Kubrick put something in The Shining, saying he did this shit, which maybe he, like I said, a lot of people said that, I mean, it looks like he was doing something on the side, just in case. I mean, obviously he had the ability to do stuff like this. I mean, ever seen 2001? It's unbelievable. It looks like it's real all the time. So, anyway, I'm talking about Owen Benjamin. And again, there's so many guys like this that are conservative. And they get labeled alt-right because they talk about issues that might come to where we're talking about saving the West, making sure that this and that. But they all caveat that shit. They're like, well, I'm not part of that. And I have Muslim American friends and Jewish friends and all this other shit. And I'm like, okay, we're fine. You know, we don't want you to be part of us. But at the end of the day, you know, I'll say it. When it came down to it, if we ever had an ethno-state, I would allow him in, even though he's 1/4 Jew. You know, but it'd be up to him to say he wants to be there. What we have to stop right now is when he starts saying that people are jealous of Jewish people because of their success. Then okay, then they need to just say that they're no longer to be dual citizenships with Israel, and they need to affirm their allegiance to the United States. And stupid ass laws that says that we have to support Israel all times to get a job for the state where you're at, that needs to stop. Why are we having any allegiance to Israel? We shouldn't have it, because they don't care about us. When it comes down to it, they want just their people to be in their country, and I have no issue with that. The issue here with Jewish people here is that they look at Israel as their homeland. They don't look at the United States. So I'm not saying they're an enemy, but they have their own biases. Anyway, I know I just started rambling, but look at his channel. Tell me what you think. I think that the guy has got some mental issues. You know, I think he's more like bipolar. So he says a lot of great things, but he also says things that, I mean, he's up and down all the time. So, and again, this is not anything new for people who are comics. This is how they are. They're just, I don't know, the word is. But thank you for watching, and you guys have a good day. Bye.